Hello and welcome. I'm your host, John Hill, and this is Vladcast. I'm here with my regular guest, Father Joyce. Father Gregory, how are you this evening?
I'm good, John. How are you?
Just fine, thank you.
Good.
And well, here we are, and another month has gone by, and we're looking at August.
That's
what
right.
would you say? Super busy, kind of busy, typical?
Actually, August has 2 of the 12 great feasts in it, so it's quite a bit. Plus, the beginning of the Dormition fast, the Feast of the Procession of the Cross, is kind of a big one too. So that's actually, I would say, on the busy side. A couple of really big saints. So yeah, probably busier than your average month.
Okay, let's get a quick rundown of the liturgical landmarks for the month.
Well, we'll try to hit the high spots. So the 2nd of August is the prophet Elias, a very, very popular saint, especially in the Russian tradition, interestingly, but in all Orthodox churches, he's very universally venerated. Then August 9th is Saint Panteleimon, again, very widely venerated in all Orthodox churches, and he is the patron saint of the largest Russian monastery on Mount Athos. So very well known in Russia. Not long after that, we have the Feast of the Transfiguration on the 19th, and actually right before that is the Feast of the Procession of the Cross on the first day of the Dormition Lent on the 14th. And as I said, Transfiguration, and not long after is Dormition. The Lent is short, only 2 weeks, but there's a lot going on. And then we end the month with the Saints Florus and Loris, the patron saints of stonemasons, and as you know, Metropolitan Loris ordained me, and that was his patron saint day. And there was another young man from his village who was also tonsured, a monk with him, and he was named Florus. So the Father Flor and Bishop Lover were there in Jordanville together when I was a student.
Interesting. What village was that?
I don't know. It was in Vladimirov, in the Carpatho-Russian mountains near Vladimirova, but I don't know which one it was. They were both Basil before they became monks, and they became monks together, and they were named after these two saints.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Now, so you're saying the procession of the cross, that is one of the 12?
It's not one of the 12, but
so I'm confusing that with the elevation of the
right.
cross.
There's the elevation of the cross, and then on the 3rd Sunday of Great Lent, there's also the cross holiday. They all have this same kind of liturgical structure, and so does this procession of the cross holiday.
Same troparion used for all three?
Same troparion is used. The service is the vigil is a little different than others. It's really a beautiful service, and unfortunately we don't always get to do that in our parish. A lot of times I'm gone. Sort of the family vacation is usually about that time. So God willing, one day we'll have more than one priest in the parish. Well, Father Michael helps, of course, but weekdays are hard for him. And we'll be able to do that more regularly because it is a really beautiful feast.
So the procession, it is one of the spas, one of the three Savior holidays. Is that
that's
correct?
the honey one
in the Russian folk tradition.
Yes, this is the honey.
Okay.
The honey.
There's an apple, a honey, and what's the other one?
We'll
Linen or something?
Well, it's the one of the Savior not made by hand icon on the 29th, but I don't remember what they call it. But in any case, that's the 3rd one. Yes, and so in fact we'll have liturgy for that also, because we had originally advertised the English cycle of services to be the weekend before that, but it'll actually be the 28th in the evening and the 29th in the morning. So we'll serve the feast of the icon not made by hand, which I think is kind of nice because that's the icon that we have for people to venerate when they come into church anyway, and so people are very familiar with that.
Right. Okay. Let's go back to Elias and what makes somebody stand out in the Old Testament for Christians.
Well, he was a real great zealot of the one true God, and he lived in Israel in a time when there was a real apostasy to Baal, to the pagan god, the golden calf, and he's famous as being, this great zealot for the true God. And people remember reading his life, all of the interesting things that happened to him. Like when, if you remember, they built the 2 altars, and first the priests of the Baal did all of their prayers, and they were cutting themselves and everything, and nothing happened. And then Saint Elias asked that the water be poured on his altar, and he prayed, and fire came down from heaven, and took up all of these things. And it was a very important and powerful image for the Israelites to see that this wasn't a game, that it wasn't like, well, maybe I'll choose this God or maybe I'll choose this God. They're all about the same. It was not any more dark or unclear who was God. And so that's a very powerful thing, and people remember him for that. Also, perhaps, maybe even more importantly, from a theological point of view, I don't know, I guess you could argue it, is when he was in a cave. If you remember, he was in the cave, and there was a storm, and there was an earthquake, and there was fire, and he was trying sort of to hear the voice of God, so to speak. And when the calm breeze came after all of this, then he realized that this is the way that God is. And that's an important, I think, a very important thing for us as Christians, as we understand, as St. John the Divine said, God is love. And we can understand, looking back on that experience that he had, how it is that we should understand God. So, very important prophet, and that's just a couple of things from his life. That's not to mention when, with his prayers, there was no rain in Israel for 3 years, and raising the widow's son from the dead. And so, I mean, he was a very important prophet, and he was always widely venerated in Kiev and Rus. And there were great temples were built and named after him. And so really very well known. And also, the fiery chariot, that's a good, very memorable thing.
That's kind of his trademark, right?
That is.
Are there any icons of Prophet Elias without the chariot?
Oh, there are. You can find the ones with just him and the raven, when he's being fed by the raven in the wilderness. And even there's a very ancient one, ancient from the Russian point of view, which is just a bust of Prophet Elias. I think that one's in Tretyakovskaya. In any case, there is a lot of iconography of this prophet. And so thankfully the feast is on a Sunday this year. So that's nice. A lot of people...
And we're going to observe his feast.
We will.
And there's going to be a vigil on the...
There will be a vigil on the evening before, on Saturday as usual, and then on Sunday we'll have Divine Liturgy, and we should actually, a couple of priests have told me that they're coming to visit that day. So
now, why would they want to do that?
Well, one is passing, actually they're both passing through, and they're on vacations, and they're stopping to be with us, which is great.
Yeah.
It's really nice. So we should have 3 priests serving that day, God willing. It'll be a very special Prophet Elias day here at St. Vladimir.
Now, that's a Polyeleos type feast?
Yes, I think it might even be a vigil. I'll have to look, but it's a very high-ranking feast.
So, as it often happens, if one comes to the vigil and listens carefully, there are all sorts of theological concepts associated with Prophet Elias. For instance, if I don't get to read about him, I can come and learn about all of these.
Absolutely. The divine services are theology in action. So here, if we could go to every divine service every day, we'd hear almost the entire New Testament and a very good chunk of the Old Testament read each year. We'd learn about all these lives of the saints. We'd learn the very important theological teachings of the Church. Especially on Saturday night when we have the canon about the resurrection, there's a lot of really important things there. And if you think about the history of the Church, for the vast majority of the time, most people were illiterate. So they had 2 ways to learn about the faith. One was the divine services, and the other was iconography. And so really, it's so important to attend the services because you can learn so much from them. Not to mention the fact that when you're in God's house, there's a sort of special grace that you tap into. And so it's very important to be at the services, and this will be a good one for people to come to. The canon for the Prophet Elias is a very interesting one.
I'm looking forward to it. Now, let's see. You want to share some quick impressions of our St. Vladimir Vacation Bible School that just finished?
Yeah, we had that one in July, and it was really great. I have to say, we had a really good turnout of kids and teachers, and it was just really, I like the way it all came together. Even the young people, some of the teenagers were helping, and it was just really nice. It was a very family-centered sort of thing, and I think it went really well. I was really happy with it. Of course, we're going to do our best to make it even better next year, but I think we really had a very good Vacation Bible School, and I want to thank everybody who worked so hard to make that happen, because it's a big undertaking. Yeah. It's a big undertaking, and most likely, again, we will do it next year on the same week of the Royal Martyrs as we have for many years. But there was some talk of doing it the last week of June, so we'll just have to see exactly how that works. That way, the kids who go to ORPR camp could also participate in the Vacation Bible School. So we'll see. We have a good turnout at ORPR camp this year of our kids, and it would be nice if they could participate in the Vacation Church School also.
Right. Well, congratulations to the kids and the teachers for what sounds like a great experience.
It was
this
wonderful.
Year. Parish Family Seminar.
Oh yes.
What can you tell us about that, Father?
Right. So a few years ago, the Holy Synod established a feast of Saints Peter and Fevronia in September, outside of a fasting period, because their main feast day falls in a fasting period, and people wanted to get married on their feast day. Well, you can't get married during a fasting time. So there was a great kind of call for an establishment of a second feast day, which was established as the Sunday right after the New Year, if I recall correctly, the Church New Year. So we started to have, we started to try to do a sort of family, something supportive for families at that time, to bring in a speaker or to have some kind of conference or seminar or something like that. Well, it turns out that our festival is usually about that time, and so we pushed this just a little bit later. And the last weekend of October, yes, it is the last full weekend of October, the 24th and 25th, we have Father David Moser coming from Boise, Idaho, and he's been a family counselor for many years and a priest for many years. And he's going to give us a kind of a 2-day seminar, and he'll give us a couple of lectures. We'll have some other interactive opportunities for the parents, and we'll have babysitting for the whole weekend, so that it's as easy as possible for the parents to participate. And I think it's going to be really great. I mean, I think a few years ago, we were able to do a sort of a marriage retreat, and I thought it was good, but we just haven't been able to quite get that done again. And so we have Father David this year, and we have already somebody pretty much lined up for next year. So God willing, we'll kind of get into this pattern where we will every year, middle to end of October, we'll have an opportunity for parents, for families to come together and to sort of strengthen their bonds.
Because families are important.
Families are important.
Right.
Families are sort of a family is a small church, and a church is a big family. And so that metaphor, that's a great metaphor, but it's also true. And so it's really important for us to strengthen our families whenever we can.
Okay, well, the one thing that I'm not really clear about is you said that people wanted to get married on Peter and Fevronia Day, but it's not like Orthodox people started wanting to get married only, recently. So why was this not an issue before?
So their veneration was much more local in Murom, where they are from, but after the fall of the Soviet Union, at least as far as I can tell, before that, it didn't seem to be very widespread in Russia. They were kind of more like local saints. But at least from our perspective abroad, it seems like after the fall of the Soviet Union, their veneration spread a lot.
Okay.
And so it was really only in these last 20 years or so when people began to really know about them and learn about them. And so the church does nothing fast, let's be honest. We look at things and think about things and pray about things. And so after a few years, then the Holy Synod decided that, yes, we should establish a second feast day. And so now there is one. And that's great. It's great because it's always on a Sunday, which is nice. And also Sunday's the time when people often get married. So it's really a nice situation.
Okay.
For us, as I said, there's always this conflict of the festival being about that time, but that's okay.
So what would you say is the sort of biggest peak in the liturgical landscape of August?
Of August? Well, I think theologically the most important feast has got to be Transfiguration. I mean, you could make an argument that after Pascha, that's the most important feast from a theological point of view anyway.
Okay.
So the Lord is exhibiting for us several things. One, that he is really God. Two, that he is the God of the Old Testament and the New Testament.
He
right?
does that by having the Moses and Elijah.
Moses has got the law and the prophets there, and then he's got the apostles for the New Testament. And they're all there on the mountain. So that's really important. And what's also really important is that it gives us an example of how we are to live our lives as Christians. You know, Christianity is not a moralistic religion. You know, if you do the right thing, then, you know, you get the right reward. We are to be changed, to be transformed, to be transfigured spiritually, to become the sons and daughters of God. And so the church is calling us to a really high calling. That's how we understand salvation. And Transfiguration is the feast that is the best metaphor for this. So this idea of transforming is not just that God transformed on the mountain, but that we also, as his disciples, need to be transformed. So this is a really, really, really important feast. And what we can also say about it is not only is it important, but it's also popular. This is the feast of the blessing of the fruit in the Northern Hemisphere. And everybody loves that feast. You know, people bring the traditional apples or grapes, and everything else. You know, every kind of first fruit. This is the blessing of first fruits. The harvest is just beginning to come in the Northern Hemisphere at this time. And so this feast is great because people come, they bring their fruits. It's just a really, everyone has a very nice spirit to them. And so I always really love this feast. I find it just pleasant on every possible level. The real challenge is how do you give a sermon that's not, you know, this huge theological oration of, you know, 40 minutes long, because there's a lot in the feast. But we will do our best to be brief.
Okay. Are there any places where someone could get Transfiguration wrong, like any heresies associated, like, for instance, the theophany kind of it gave rise to the sort of adoptionism, right? That Christ wasn't, really the Son of God until he was, quote unquote, adopted there.
Right.
Any potential problems with Transfiguration?
There are, unfortunately, every heresy is sort of man thinking that he's wiser than God. So at every turn, there's a possibility for this to become a problem. But nothing jumps out at me right off the top of my head as being sort of centered on Transfiguration. I think really big, important, good feast.
Okay. And then, is there like maybe a few meters smaller?
Well, for sure. I mean, we have the Dormition of the Mother of God, which is also a huge feast.
And there's a fast before that.
There is a fast, and interestingly, Transfiguration is during the fast. The Transfiguration happened during Great Lent. This is the only one of the feasts that is moved from the time when it actually happened, and it's such a big feast. It's such a triumphant feast that the fathers of the church decided that, okay, this one time we're going to move this out of Great Lent, because Great Lent is not a lot about triumphant, especially because this one is a fixed date.
So it was a feast that was moved, but it's not a movable feast.
That's right. And moreover, it was one time movable and no longer. But moreover, it was moved into another strict fasting period because
they did that on purpose?
Yes. The Dormition.
What was there first? Was the Dormition fast there, and then they moved Transfiguration into it, or they decided they needed a fasting period, and so they made a fasting period for Dormition to kind of accommodate and dress up Transfiguration? I
don't think it was to dress up Transfiguration. So the church, as it works and makes these decisions, is always under the guidance of the Holy Spirit. And so so the feast itself was probably moved there before the Dormition Fest existed. That's the most likely scenario. The thing is, in the ancient church, these things were a lot more malleable, depending on where you were, because you couldn't kind of call somebody up or check out their website and see what they were doing. But the fact of the matter is that the Dormition was a little bit later that fast came. So Transfiguration was already moved there, makes a very nice sort of balance between coming from a strict fast, and now we've moved it out of this strictest of fasts, but still moved it into a fasting period.
So why are some that we have like 4 major fasting periods? Why are some super strict, pretty strict, and then not so strict? What's the
So there's
thinking?
basically kind of 2 flavors of fasting periods. The Nativity and the Apostles' Fast are very, very similar in character. There's a lot of the food restrictions are not very, very strict. You abstain from milk and dairy products, you can eat a lot of fish, and so on and so forth. Whereas Great Lent and the Dormition Lent are very similar in that they're quite strict. During Great Lent, there are only a few days when you could have fish. I mean, strict from a dietary point of view. And during Dormition Fast, the only time you have fish is on Transfiguration. So they are very similar in that way. The services, however, there's a different character of services in Great Lent. During Great Lent, the services change significantly. During the Dormition Lent, they don't. We still have the services basically the same. There's liturgy every day, as opposed to during Great Lent, there's not. So it's maybe not quite as strict from that point of view, looking at the whole Lent, but from a culinary point of view, they're similar.
Did I hear you mention that Bishop Peter is coming to our neighborhood, not our parish?
He is. He's coming to our neighborhood. He'll be at the Dormition Cathedral in Ferndale for their feast day on the 27th of August in the evening and the 28th in the morning for liturgy. And as is our regular practice at St. Vladimir's, we won't have services. The only time we have services for Dormition, frankly, is if the feast falls on a Sunday. In which case, Vladika wants us to still have service because people will come in any case.
Yeah.
And sadly, in fact, people come anyway. We close the church, announce it, everything, and people still come. I wish that wasn't the case. On the other hand, it's great that people sort of know that they need to come to church on that day. But
it's like a reflex.
Yes,
Condition.
Which is a good one. It's one of the good ones. But we won't have services at all for Dormition here. We'll be with our sister parish there in Ferndale for their feast.
Now, is that the only Dormition church in the diocese, or are there others? Oh,
no, it is
only one.
It is the only one, which is great. Because then the bishop is not sort of torn where he should be.
He doesn't have to decide where to go.
Right. And in fact, honestly, we have some churches that have the same feast days, and we had so many churches that had the Feast of the Protection of the Mother of God that one asked the bishop to change their patron feast day, and he did.
The bishop can do that?
Yep.
Wow.
I mean, he can't be in 2 places in one time, and certainly he can't be in 3 or 4. So. Actually, I thought that was nice because now it's a feast day is the second Pascha of a parish, so it's a really big deal, and to have the bishop come and preside at that is really important. But if he has to kind of be going one place one year and one place another year, and the people rarely see him, that's really unfortunate. So they changed the date, and it was great.
Okay. All right. Now we need to talk about Walk of Life.
Oh yes,
That's a pilgrimage.
that is a pilgrimage.
What's that all about?
So this is a youth pilgrimage. Let me restate that. This is sponsored by our diocesan youth department. A few years ago at the St. Herman's Conference, we showed a short clip about a pilgrimage that takes place in Russia every year. And the young people got pretty excited about that and thought that was really a good idea. So we started to look for a sort of pilgrimage route, a real procession, not just like procession around the church, but a real long procession where we can bring the faith out to the people who are outside. And it turned out that really the only practical route was to go from Dormition Monastery in Rives Junction, the Romanian monastery, to St. Vladimir's. So it's not that we're sponsoring the activity per se. We'll be very active in it. We hope to have a lot of people participate, and since we're the local parish, we hope that a lot of people will volunteer. We're going to need a lot of help. But this takes place over the Labor Day holiday, and I think it's going to be a really wonderful pilgrimage. It's going to be very spiritually focused, of course, which is what a pilgrimage is. We will begin the pilgrimage at Dormition Monastery with liturgy, and we're encouraging everybody who's on the pilgrimage to partake of the divine mysteries every day. So we'll leave on Saturday morning from there after liturgy. Sunday, we'll be at a campground, but we have everything that we need to serve liturgy at the campground. So we'll serve liturgy there. God willing, the weather will be good. It'll be under the open sky. If not, there's actually a shelter where we can do this. And so we'll serve liturgy there. And then Monday, the pilgrims will be at St. Vladimir's, and we'll serve liturgy on that day.
Monday
Labor
afternoon
Day.
sometime?
They will be here, actually they'll get here Sunday night. We underestimate the speed with which we walk. People usually walk about 3 miles an hour. That's not a terribly brisk pace. We've set the pace at about half that for the pilgrimage, because we're going to have to make some stops. We're going to be carrying banners and icons and stuff like that. So it's not like you're going out for a power walk. But the idea is to bring the faith out to the people, and for those who are participating in the pilgrimage to make a special kind of effort. So a pilgrimage is an effort. You know, when we think about pilgrimages, we think about Jerusalem, going to Jerusalem, and that every Christian has this desire in their heart to at least once go to Jerusalem and to venerate the holy places, and especially the Lord's tomb. Well, there are other kinds of pilgrimage that are more local, and this is one that's a little more local, but it gives the young people and those who are young at heart, frankly, anyone who's 9 years old or above is going to be welcome to participate. You have to be with a parent unless you're 14 and above. But people are welcome to participate, and we really want them to participate. It gives people an opportunity to make a very focused spiritual struggle. And that's what a pilgrimage is. And that's what this is going to be too. So we'll be reading the prayers before communion all together as a group. Usually when we make our water stops, we'll read some.
There's going to be water provided?
There will be water provided. Lots of water provided. Food will be provided. There's not really a cost. We're asking people to make a small donation to cover, some of the costs. But the idea is to get a lot of people together, spiritually focused, and working together on the same goal, which is to get from Dormition Monastery to St. Vladimir's, and along the way to really grow spiritually.
The way that you described it, Father Gregory, I'm kind of thinking that maybe I would even like to participate.
John, I think it would be great if you participated. Yeah. I think it would be wonderful.
I do have a couple questions, though. So the route, like, where are we going to be? What sort of road or path is?
So we worked on the route with the sheriff's departments in Jackson and Washtenaw counties, because we'll be in both counties, and they asked us to stay off of major roads, as you would imagine, as much as possible. So working with them, we found a route where basically there's only two kind of major roads that we're going to touch at all. We have to cross M52 because there's just no way to get from Dormition Monastery to here without doing that. They're going to cover us on that. That's going to be done Sunday right after liturgy. We'll have liturgy, pack up the campground, and go. And they've dedicated somebody to be there with a squad car, lights flashing, the whole 9 yards, so that we can cross safely. The other place where we're going to need some help is at the end of the day on Sunday when we go onto Jackson Road here. Because there's also no way to get to St. Vladimir's without touching Jackson Road. But we made the route such that we'll be only walking from Dancer to here. So it's about a mile. It's not too far. And in fact, talking with the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department, they really feel like even if they can't come, that it's going to be okay, because we'll have A car in front, probably a van with flashing yellow lights, and a car behind with flashing yellow lights will be really, well marked, and will be, when we're on Jackson Road, we'll really tighten up the procession, because inevitably it's going to kind of accordion. Some people will go slower and a little bit faster, but we have to keep people more or less on the same pace so that we don't have a line that's 5 miles long, because when cars pass us, that's just not safe. So especially on Jackson Road, we'll really tighten it up.
Okay.
But I think it's going to be amazing. There is no other pilgrimage like this in North America. Nothing.
Wow.
This is it. And so I'm really hoping that this is established as a sort of annual tradition, and that I think it's a really great blessing for our parish that it's going to end here. That we will have liturgy here with all the young people and all those young at heart who are participating, and that altogether that'll kind of be the capstone. We'll have liturgy here, we'll have a meal for everyone, and then they'll disperse to their homes, because the next day is a school day. No matter where you live, the day after Labor Day, you're in school.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. And then my second question: what does one need to serve liturgy at a campground?
Good question. So we have portable altars, actually. It's really a nifty design. I'll show it to you, and people will see pictures of it when they see the pictures from the pilgrimage. But basically, if we have a minivan, we can carry 2 of those portable altars, 2 icon stands and icons, the chalice and so on and so forth. That's relatively small. We can easily carry that. So it's really the altars that make the difference. And because of the really neat design of these things, they're very portable. So we won't have an iconostasis, obviously, but that's really not that crucial in this kind of a situation. But we'll be able to have both an altar and a table of preparation where the gifts will be prepared. So really, it should go relatively smoothly. In fact, we had to use these same exact altar tables at the 700th anniversary of St. Sergius in Cleveland last year, because there were so many people were there, we couldn't actually use the altar for the altar. So we sort of built an altar in the middle of the cathedral, and that's where the divine services were held.
Wow.
Yeah, so these are really nicely designed. Really like them. They're very, very solid, and I think we're going to be in a really good place to serve liturgy.
Excellent. I'm really excited about this.
Me too.
I didn't think that I was going to get so juiced about the pilgrimage. I think one final thing to say is probably advise people to make sure they have good walking shoes.
Yes. In fact, everyone who registers is going to get a sort of instruction sheet that tells them exactly what they need to do and how they need to care for their feet and so on and so forth. And we'll work with Carl Meyer especially on that, because as a former infantry officer, he's an
expert walker.
An expert walker, and especially an expert in foot care.
Okay.
So if we take care of our feet, it's not going to be a problem. But if people are having a lot of blisters and so on and so forth, that's going to be difficult. We will have medical staff with us always during the whole pilgrimage. One of the 2 chase vehicles will be a medical vehicle, and I mean it'll be a van with someone. Hopefully, we'll have a nurse all the time, but for sure we'll have people who are well versed in first aid, and so we should be able to take care of anything that happens on the walk.
All right. Well, Father, I think we should end it here. Otherwise, if we go too long, people won't tune in next month for the September version of Vladcast. Don't miss it. For Father Gregory and St. Vladimir Parish, I'm John Hill, and we'll see you next month.